What I had planned to do before I left for India was to answer a question or a series of questions that Mark had posed to us when we met. And that was, who are you and why have you come to this class? So I'm going to share just a couple minutes with you about myself and tell you why this class makes tremendous sense to me. I come from a family background where on my mother's side, I'm named after two men, Daniel Wallace Bush Sr. and Daniel Wallace Bush Jr. My name is Daniel Wallace Close. And on this particular side, both of my great-great-grandfather and great-grandfather were hellfire and brimstone Methodist preachers in the tradition of mission. Mission meaning that you created a church, a community, that then not just ministered to the person's soul, but ministered to their actual lives. They brought in orphans and mothers that were unwed and orphans and created a tremendous community. It was an idealistic community. My great-grandfather, Daniel Wallace Bush Jr., on the other hand, rebelled against that upbringing and was kind of a worldly person until he was about 25 years old, at which point he was stumbling in the snow in upper Michigan, having consumed too much alcohol, and stumbled onto a prayer and revival meeting that was run by a famous revivalist at the time. And he had a conversion experience at that time. He was going one way, turned, and went the other way. And so this particular minister requested that he then take his family and move out west and create rescue missions in the area around Spokane, Washington, and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And at that time, they were building big railroads in that part of the country, and there were many Chinese laborers who had fallen on the hard side of opium. And so he built a house for his family and the church, and there were many men living in their home on a regular basis. He then left and went to Prosser, Washington, where he did the same thing, and then after the big earthquake in San Francisco, he moved to San Francisco to create rescue missions, at which that was the point where my grandmother was born. So on that side of the family, it was always religion and human services combined. Very consistent. There were very few human services that weren't connected to the church at that time. Now, on my father's side, my grandmother, Ruth McKeever Close, was also raised in this particular case, in a Methodist family of the other ilk, more of a progressive Methodism. And when she graduated from high school, she left the home and went to work with Jane Addams in Hull House in Chicago. So on both sides of my family, I have these very strong religious human service draws. So when I was born, Daniel Wallace Close, the combination of the two families, it was just assumed that I would be a minister. And so my mother prepared me, my grandmother, my aunts, everybody would always talk about Danny was going to be a preacher. So I had to learn how to do public speaking, I had to learn how to sing, I had to have a good memory for Bible verses, I had to know all the hymns, etc. And I continued to be a very good boy all my life and went to California Lutheran College to be a minister. And the type of minister that I was being promoted to be was really more of a minister with service attached to it. So you don't just get up on Sunday morning and preach a sermon, you also get involved in the community, whatever that community is. But when I went to college and I saw an absence of the service component, there was no service. It was just preach, very doctrinaire, make sure that you know how to raise money for the church, things like this. I was a bit turned off. And so after my entire life of wanting to be a minister, I decided against it. At which point, coincidentally, my mother converted from Lutheranism, having been born a Baptist, to more of an Eastern religion, and began following a guru, traveling to India, traveling around the East. And so I was one of the most confused people on earth. Here I am, been raised and promoted and all this very clear path, and now I'm being told that there are multiple paths to achieve my goals. So I continued to be a Christian, and what I learned from all of those experiences is that I could take my faith, my spiritual underpinnings of my life, and I could apply it to human services. And so that's what I've been doing for my entire professional career. As I've walked down the path of pairing my faith, my spiritual beliefs with human services, I have come across many instances of what you all talked about, the really positive examples, really wonderful examples of people giving and sharing and really being an expression of their faith with human services. And I've also seen the opposite. And of course, being in the area of child abuse and neglect and disabilities and things like this, I've seen multiple examples of how religion or different faiths have perverted essential missions for the service. And I was really struck by the way that conversation took place last week. So what I'd like to share with you simply is that for me, whatever my faith is, and whatever my desire to provide services really is indicative of kind of an integration of what it is that makes sense for me. I could see myself being a human service professional without having any spiritual or religious underpinnings, and I could see myself being a spiritual person without having any human service inclinations. And there are many people that have both. I just choose to pair them together because it makes so much sense for me. So hopefully this class will make tremendous sense for you, that there are lots of people out there who, either because of their spiritual faith, really resonate to service. And I'll be talking next week in a lot more detail about that, and what are some of the conceptual frameworks that we can use to understand that. But I can also hear many people that say, doggone it, there's just too much intrusion of personal values into service, and there's too much potential for abuse. And what I hope occurs as a result of this class is that each of you take a mature view of that. Take a mature view in the sense that, drop the story. Don't have a predetermined orientation to anybody, much less a potential client. And that way we'll all probably live very well together, and there'll be greater opportunity for us to give of ourselves and share in a real respectful and appreciative manner. And I just want to thank Mark again, because I just love hearing him speak and appreciating the wisdom that he brings in this important topic. So thank you for all being here. And now I'm just going to sit and listen.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. And again, thank you, Carrie, for the tremendous amount of work that has gone into creating this course, and to all of you for participating in it. And I've met several times with both Carrie and with Dan as we moved towards the beginning of the course, and had heard some of the ideas of what went into this course. But this is the first time that I had an opportunity to hear a little bit more of Dan's personal story, of which I really appreciate, and the multiple perspectives, spiritual, religious, cultural, that he brings to this project, many of which resonate with my sort of orientation and things that I shared with you last time. And then I thought we'd do the name thing again, as we did last time. And the theme for this time, say your name, and then share some thoughts about that came to you, or that you'd like to share with the class about our first meeting. Anything you'd like to say, what you found interesting, what you found surprising, what you found striking, what you enjoyed, what troubled you, what you disagreed with. I think that those would be just as important and welcome as things that you liked about it. But we do want to keep it brief, but I think it'll just add to the shared body of conversation and knowledge as we move forward. So we'll begin with a volunteer. We'll just go around. So say your name and share something about your sort of response to our first class meeting. So did you want to begin?
Sure. I'm Tara, and I really enjoyed last week. I thought that everyone was really respectful and also very open to sharing, which is, I enjoyed that a lot. And I especially liked the end of the class when you got more into the stories, and that was really cool because then I think I got to understand those specific religions more. So.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm Jordan, and I really enjoyed the conversation we had last week about differences in culture and when to intervene and when to recognize those as differences.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Jenny, and I realize how many preconceived notions I have coming into this conversation and how beneficial it will be for me to drop them as best I can, to learn myself and then also to see from other perspectives better.
I'm Jessica, and I was kind of thinking the same thing as her actually, but just about how a lot of us have a stereotype of that we don't even necessarily want to have or have on purpose about different religions and how important they are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'm Erin. I wasn't here last week, but I watched on YouTube, and I'm just really excited to learn about all the different aspects of this course. And I really liked the drop the story.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was, I've never heard anything so blunt like that, but I really kind of was like, oh, light switch.
Very good, very good. Uh-huh.
My name is Monet, and I also wasn't here last week, but this is the epitome of my favorite class, the class I've always wanted to be in, so I'm very excited to be here. And I just got back from India as well, so this is exciting for me because I'm on a crave to learn about more religions, so excited.
My name is Pedro, and I'm just here because they invited me to come, and I'm kind of thinking, I don't know, it's just really, it seems really cool. I wasn't here last week, but it's getting my attention.
My name is Sand, and I really appreciated last week just learning the complexities about various religions in human services. And I'm also learning that I'm really going to struggle with the course and the different things that we're learning just because it is fairly contradictory to my faith, but I'm really excited for just to learn more about those complexities and those challenges, and this is why I'm here. So.
Very good, very good.
I'm Lindsay, and I really enjoyed having a conversation with Sam last week about how we practice our faiths differently, and I'm interested to learn about other religions, but also how different branches of my own faith are different than my own.
My name is Missy, and I really enjoyed the small group discussions that we had last week. I thought it was really beneficial to hear perspectives from other people on religion and just learn other people's stories.
My name is Kelly, and I guess for me personally, I learned the difference between my spirituality versus religion. Whereas my family as a whole practices, I guess, Buddhism as a religion, but for me and my mom, it's more, our spirituality is more towards Christianity. So just learning the difference between the two.
My name is Tara. I enjoyed the class. I especially liked how you encouraged us to ask questions and how it felt like a safe place to do so.
Good.
My name is Leah, and last week I really enjoyed the small group discussion because it was really interesting learning listening to everybody's opinion between spirituality and religion, and the differences that everybody holds in each of those.
My name is Dana, and I like the small group conversations too, and seeing how people with different perspectives of religion and spirituality, and how everyone's thoughts just kind of were different, but people had a lot of different opinions on it, and it was nice to see that.
My name's Alyssa, and what I really enjoyed last time was the fact that we just had such a diverse group of people here. And while I may have had a negative a negative outcome of like religion, I like the fact that I can hear from other people their positive experiences, and I feel like this is a class where I'm going to consistently learn from different people and people speaking up and stuff, and it's really helpful that everyone's really outgoing in this class. It feels safe to talk in this class.
Good.
My name's Megan, and I was just super surprised about how the discussions went. Like, people had a lot of things to say, and I just thought that was really cool, because I've been in classes where it's supposed to be discussion class and no one talks. So that was just really awesome to hear people's point of views.
Okay, my name is Richard. I usually see that religion and politics are divisive, but I was very thankful that last time, the first meeting we had last week was very constructive, very civil, and there was like tolerance of letting someone speak. It wasn't shouting, and you did a good job with both of you in terms of conducting the meetings. Yeah, so I feel like I want to come back.
You're here?
Yeah.
I'm Dana. I missed last week. Hearing everyone saying really positive things about this class is making me very excited, and I'm looking forward to learning more about different religions that I don't know at this point.
I'm Bree, and I didn't sign up for the course until last night when I found out about it in class, and so I was really, really excited to be here. I grew up with kind of not really any religion ever. It was just sort of my family's personal choice, but I was taught to be extremely accepting and compassionate and understanding of everyone, and so I'm really thankful for that. But I think this class is going to be really amazing, so I think it's going to allow me to be a better human services professional, definitely.
And my name is Alden, and I was looking forward to this class all week. I actually thought that the class was yesterday until like 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and was really disappointed when it was actually today. And I think I was looking forward to it because I like the atmosphere, I like the environment, I love the way that the two of you last week conducted our meeting, just kind of the flow of things. It's a long class, but it never felt that way. And I felt like every single person was incredibly invested to be here, and I wish every class was like that. And I was fascinated by how different religions and spiritualities help and change sort of the way that communities function. And I think that you described that really well when you were talking about religions in the later portion of the class.
Thank you.
My name is Jeremiah, and I feel like leaving class, I could have probably sat in class for probably 2 more hours just hearing you talk. The way you ended class was.
You better be careful what you say.
Yeah. It was just, I feel like there have been very few classes where I've actually left and felt like blown away and just, yeah. But I really enjoyed how your facilitation of the discussions and how we were able to apply the concepts that we were learning to ourselves and then talk about it with each other. Yeah. I just am really excited about being here. So.
I'm Ivy, and I really liked the small groups, like you guys are there, because you just get to know people at like a better level than just like talking in a big group and having a good conversation.
I'm Aaron. I really enjoyed last week. I was pretty excited about it when it came up, and it met like all my expectations. Probably on the more surface level, I really enjoyed Dr. Unno's like personality coming out towards the end. I thought that was really fun, and I think that's what kind of contributed to making the class seem so much quicker also than 3 hours. So.
My name is Shelby, and I really enjoyed the discussion aspect, the small groups and as a class. And same with Jeremiah, I just really enjoyed, and Tara actually, the reading of the end of the stories, and I thought that was just that alone really helped me understand the religions that we were discussing.
Good, good. Well, thank you all for sort of sharing your perspectives. It's wonderful to hear, and I've been looking forward since last week's meeting to our meeting this week. And I wanted to just review a few points that came up in our conversation, both with regard to the larger issues surrounding religion, spirituality, human services, as well as just touch on a couple points on Chinese religion, and then go on to Buddhism today. But before I do that, I just want to say a word about the nature of our discussion. And so many of you had positive things to say about how you felt the discussion went. And I also had that impression. And I love teaching here at the University of Oregon. I love classes that allow for more discussion, that are, I teach large lecture courses of 150 students, but I also teach smaller courses, anywhere from seminar of 15 students to a more intermediate-sized class of 40 or 50 students. And anything less than 50, we're able to have a more discussion-oriented class. And I tend to enjoy those more, and students, it seems, also seem to enjoy that. So I'm very glad and really appreciative of how you all have contributed to making this environment one that's not only, safe, as some of you shared, safe, enjoyable, but rewarding in terms of learning from one another as much as you might from me or from the materials that are presented by the course. And in that context, one of the important skills, especially if you are in the helping professions, especially if you are aspiring or already in something related to family human services or anything that has, in the religious context, some ministerial dimension, which is the ability to listen. And oftentimes, the ability to listen as well as to speak skillfully and appropriately is key. And I don't think that we could have had the conversation that we did last week unless you were good listeners. It's because you're good listeners that we're all able to allow the key points, the subtle points, the complicated points to emerge. And some of you shared that in your impressions of last week as we went around, that in the small group or in the larger group, that you had a conversation partner or you had conversations with people who have very different backgrounds or perspectives from your own. And some of you shared that can even be personally or emotionally challenging because we're touching on subject matter that runs very deep in our lives. And yet, you were able to find that meaningful, significant, enriching. And that's a very high level of skill in terms of the overall learning process, what it means to learn as a human being. And especially when it involves a subject matter like religion, if you look at the history of human civilization, 99% or greater percentage of human conflict has either been, fought in the name of religion or has invoked religion. And if you look at how civil or reasonable conversation and discourse about religion has evolved, you can look at certain historical markers. 1893, Chicago, the first World Parliament of Religions, where different religions from around the world gathered for the first time explicitly for the purpose of sharing and appreciating religious diversity instead of primarily for the purpose of conversion and conquest. But if you actually read the transcripts of papers presented in 1893 and the viewpoints that people wanted to, share, there's a huge amount in which people wanted to say, yes, we appreciate all religions are great, but ours is the greatest after all. And it's quite clear that's the case. And I wouldn't fault them in that time, because for that time, representatives of different religions and philosophies and so forth, that was a huge step to make, to say we should appreciate all different religious, spiritual, philosophical perspectives. Forward another century, 1993, the next World Parliament of Religions held in Chicago. Same purpose, but now far advanced in terms of sophistication in appreciating human religious experience, the diversity of it, the spiritual dimension of it, and so on and so forth. But still, reading through a lot of these papers, there's still subtle but unmistakable sense. Yes, you have very sophisticated understanding. I want to learn what you're about. But let me tell you what is truly profound. It's very difficult to get out of the perspective that I have. That's closest to home is what I feel is the greatest. And as an antidote to that, sometimes when I have a teaching a course that's related to religious studies and so forth, I sometimes say to students, isn't it interesting? Of course, you know, people often adopt religious perspectives that are quite different from what they were born into. But at the same time, a huge percentage of people around the world who have a religious orientation feel that, you know, their religious perspective is really the best one, not just for themselves, but you know, potentially to share with others. And isn't it an interesting fact that such a large percentage of people are so lucky to have been born into the best religion in the world? So, by nature, of course, everything that's close to home, especially things that we've had positive experiences with, we're going to feel most positive towards. But it also shows that it's very difficult to really move beyond that, to really drop the story, and to really see, hear, feel the person who is before me, and therefore to be able to try to understand what is the most helpful way that I can relate to this person, what is the most helpful way that I can understand this person, what is the most helpful thing that I can do. In my work in the field of Buddhism and psychotherapy, I've been fortunate to be part of a group of scholars and colleges and universities that we have organized a series of international conferences on the topic. And we had scholars, we also had practitioners, psychiatrists, psychotherapists, counselors, also religious teachers, people who are leaders in their own religious community, Buddhist community, and we also had outside people outside of Buddhism join the conversation from Christian background, Jewish background, so forth. These are people, especially since a number of them are world class, they're internationally known. I thought this is going to be really, really good, because these are people who are considered the top experts in their field at listening. I wanted these people to see the conversation that some of my own students had in my classes, and I would say also this class last week, on skillful listening and being open to being challenged by taking seriously the deep commitments that people have that's different from their own. You know, so even people who are the experts at the art of listening, are supposed to be, often have a hard time listening to one another. Certainly, I count myself as one of those who needs to learn that skill better. My wife has a nickname for me. She speaks Japanese. She's fluent in both, but she was born and raised in Japan. And so she has a Japanese nickname for me. It's Hariko no Tora, Hariko no Tora. And this is a traditional Japanese toy. Tora means tiger. And Hariko, it's a paper mache sculpture. So this is a paper mache tiger. And the characteristic of this paper mache tiger is that the body is in one piece, the head is an articulating head that's usually hung on a string, and it bobs up and down. So do you know why she calls me paper mache tiger with a bobbing head? Because when we're at dinner, she's talking, and I'm going like this. And she says to me, "What did I just say?" And I go, and usually I could repeat the last 3 words that she said. She says, "See, you're not listening." So I myself have a great deal to learn in terms of listening. But I think that you all did an excellent job listening to one another. And without that, the points, the very articulate points that were being made by many of you wouldn't have had the audience that drew those insights out. And I think it can continue to help us in our discussion if you are aware of that factor. That, if you tend to be someone who is very articulate and presenting a lot of points, but then you may feel, well, what do others have to say about it? Maybe I want to stand back a little bit and now work on my listening skill. Or some of you may feel, I really love to listen and learn, and I know that's good, but really there are going to be times, if I work in this field, where I really need to speak up. So I may be a little bit more on the shy side or introverted side, but maybe if there's an opportunity, I'll raise my hand and maybe I can share a thought. So whatever you have to say, there's nothing that's meaningless. Everything has value. If you have a question, probably many other people in the class have that question. If you have points to make, I think probably other people have a similar point of view that they would like to share, that you should share that. But it goes even subtler than that, that as this course progresses, long after I'm gone and this course goes on, that you will start to observe one another and begin to see how other people are in this rhythm of speaking, listening, of being proactive, of being receptive. So these are some of the thoughts that came to me as I enjoyed last week's class. Okay. So I just want to review a couple of points. If you look at the handout that Carrie passed out for me. Some of these points were points that I wanted to bring out, but that were often either independently or in relation to some points that I brought out were reinforced by you. Some of them were brought out more by you than what I said, but I hope I'm accurate in this regard, that religion can function positively or negatively in a person's life depending on many factors: background, cultural factors, life experiences, and specific situations. And it can be as important for a person in a helping profession or in family human services to become aware of how one's own exposure to and background in religion, spirituality, might frame or influence how one approaches one's work or in one's relationship to a particular client, as it is to learn more about the client's own religious background. So what is the interaction between my own religious, philosophical assumptions and the background of the person I'm working with? And one can draw on one's own spirituality or religious background as a resource to help other people. But depending on the particular context and particular interaction, this could be helpful or unhelpful. So self-knowledge in the professional sense may be as significant as objective knowledge. And one way to maximize effectiveness and help in the helping professions is to truly listen to and to see the client as a person. And one way to effect this is, as we discussed and Dan reiterated, is to drop the story of whatever one might think the client is or should be, as well as the story of who I think I am or should be. Okay. So I just want to stop for a moment, and if you have any comments or thoughts before I go on to just review a few points in Chinese religion and then go on to Buddhism. Does anybody want to share any thoughts along these lines right now? You don't have to. You don't have to. But if you have something you want to share.
Any small, tangible next steps one might take in order to drop the story?
Yes, so good. So good. So I just want to try an experiment, okay? So we're all just going to sit together silently. And I just want you to feel the rhythm in the room. Just feel the rhythm in the room, okay? Just look around a little bit. And just allow yourself to take in the people in the room and get a sense of, each person. Yeah. Each person. and you can get a sense of your own sort of feeling. Some of you might feel a little bit of anxiousness. Oh my gosh, we're not talking. Okay. Some of you might feel like, oh, that's kind of interesting. There is a kind of energy here. Okay. Some of you are going to notice the physical things more. The lighting's okay, but it's a little artificial. Okay. Some of you are going to be more logically engaged. This is an interesting exercise, but where will this take us? And how can I fit this into the conversation we've had? So it's very interesting, isn't it? Because there are different ways of knowing. Knowing emotionally, sensing perceptually, intuiting, thinking logically. And they're not mutually exclusive. You might be doing one or more at the same time or alternately, but you get a feel of that. Okay? Now, I want to take that a little bit further. Just want to stop for a moment and just take a breath. As you look around the room, as you feel the rhythm of the room in your own way, the class, you can see, you can feel what I've been talking about. We're in a culture, there are different cultures, different orientations, different degrees. We're in a culture that's very, very talkative for some very good reasons. So some of us, not all of us, but some of us are a little bit uncomfortable when we're not speaking. And when that happens, we get a little bit nervous about ourselves. That makes it a little bit more difficult to actually just pay attention to the person who's before us, right? But if you understand that, then you begin to realize, actually, that happens a lot. Somebody comes, it could be just a friend, and they want to talk to you about a problem, but you sense that they're having a problem, and deep down inside you might be willing to listen, but your nervousness starts to make you talk. It makes it difficult just to listen, right? Just to drop the story. I remember in another capacity that I was working where it was a helping situation, and I was briefly interviewing each person. Usually anywhere from 1 minute to about 3 minutes. And this was a workshop, retreat type setting that I had been doing this event on the East Coast. This is, I think, my 5th or 6th year doing this event. And some people have been coming every year. And there was a young woman who came up and she said, I have something I want to talk about, but I haven't been able to talk about before. I said, okay, well, what would you like to? She says, well, I'm really anxious. I'm really anxious, and I'm really, really worried about, am I doing the right thing? I said, that's interesting because, you know, these years that you've been coming to this event, I didn't get that sense because you're such a warm and embracing person, and you seem to take care of other people really well. And she says, well, that's actually an act, and I'm really anxious underneath. I said, okay, well, that's okay. And then she gave me a little bit of background information to explain why she feels that way, her personal background. I said, I can understand that that's, you know, the reasons why you feel that way, and I think, you know, you don't need to be so anxious, and you should just be comfortable in your own skin. And it was very interesting what happened in that moment. As I was saying that, she got all excited and she started talking about what she was going to do that weekend after she went home. And at first, I wasn't sure what she was saying. But then suddenly I realized, I said her name, and I said, you're doing it again. And she says, yeah. She says, yeah. And I said, you know, given everything you've experienced, how you're able to carry yourself, how you're able to work with people and do the things that you do, shows great courage and great beauty in your life. And in that moment, something fell away, and she realized she doesn't have to be so anxious. She doesn't have to be so anxious. So on the one hand, at that moment, I was able not to be so caught up in the conversation that I just followed the train of her thought into the weekend. I noticed that she was putting up her defensive barriers again in that moment. But afterwards, I had to think, gee, Mark, it took you 5 years to really see that. I wasn't really seeing her for the first 4 years. I wasn't really seeing her. Right? And there can be a ripening process. Maybe that's how much time it was supposed to take for her or for me. But in that particular context where I have a leadership role, I'm partially have a responsibility and therefore am somewhat anxious to make sure everything's going smoothly. But that might prevent me from dropping my story about the event itself. It needs to go smoothly. And really see, really listen, and notice that there's something underneath the surface going on with her. So, let's just breathe again. Yes.
I like when things are very clear. So you're saying in regards to Jenny's question to reflect inwards when trying to overcome these preconceived notions of religion. Is that point of the story?
Right. Okay. So knowledge and self-knowledge. And to see that even when we're not aware of it, are wanting to be concerned with something else, that the conversation continues, or that we don't have too much of a lull, can be a barrier to becoming aware of the subtler level of interaction and what assumptions I'm bringing in to how this particular relationship or conversation is being channeled. And that it takes a little bit of effort to let go of that and just allow whatever's going to come up to allow up. Now, I would say from the side of counseling and psychotherapy that one has to be careful when one does this, because sometimes there are unruly forces that are being held in check by maintaining one's social persona or social mask or facade. And that if you allow something deeper to emerge and there's somebody who's troubled and you're not prepared to field whatever's going to come up, then it could be challenging. So in that regard, being well prepared, understanding the range of human experience, a certain amount of which you can acquire through learning, reading books, a certain amount that you can acquire through internships, apprenticeships, but definitely a significant amount that you can only acquire by fire in trial and error. And there's no way around it. But one thing I'm going to mention, clinical, I'm getting a little bit off the track here, but I need to mention it because it's the most common trap, and I'll let Dan elaborate on it later in the course, but what we call borderline personality disorder, which is, in some ways, it's not that common, but in my article, I allude to this, and that's why the reading I had you do is entitled The Borderline Between Buddhism and Psychotherapy, is I would argue that there are tendencies towards borderline personality in our culture as a whole. Why? Because we are in an emotionally impoverished culture. Mother Teresa was giving a presentation to a group of wealthy women donors, and she said, I feel very sorry for you because this is the most emotionally starved culture in the world. And yet, we're highly educated. And so there are forces, there are moments, and there are people who work the culture in the negotiations that occur through media, through interaction, to try to gain emotional energy from other people through manipulation. It's constantly going on. And that tendency is already leaning in the direction of borderline personality. And the borderline personality is extremely skillful, when it becomes clinical, extremely skillful in getting, especially a person who's trying to help, getting them entrapped in their own emotional story to the degree that it can become a danger to the helper, almost like a stalker. It's such a common trap, not just for counselors and psychotherapists, but people who are entering the helping profession, to be trapped by somebody who's borderline personality, or more common, has that tendency. So I don't know if there's a way of avoiding it. It's almost like a rite of passage. But it's very scary when you get caught up. You want to say something?
Well, it was kind of a maybe gritty question.
Yeah.
I was going to ask what you think by emotionally starved culture. I mean, if you could, I guess, specify.
Yeah. And I think it's actually a good question in this context, because, one thing very unusual that I found, I've lived in many, many places, that of all the places I've lived here in the U.S. and elsewhere, but especially in the U.S., Western Oregon generally, and Eugene in particular, is kind of an exception to this, to a certain extent. I don't know what it is. It's partially the climate. It's partially the landscape. It's the amount of land we have. But people here are very mellow in a genuine way. And people are also, as a percentage of the population. And people also generally tend to be pretty relaxed. I mean, if you go to New York City, okay, certain parts, I would say, like, especially Manhattan. If you go to Los Angeles, certain parts. These tendencies are much more prominent. And, like, crime in New York City has gone way down in the last 20 years, but the emotional danger is still quite intense, I would say, because of this problem.
My personal experience, when he says that, I'm like, like 100%. I totally see where he's coming from and agree with him. It's just a different kind of point of view where how I relate to that is having now traveled to a developing country and just seeing a different way of life. And obviously there's a lot more traveling I have yet to do and will do because of that experience, but the amount of safety and kind of not like affection, but really assisting in letting those emotions run is a lot more common in other places in the world than it is here. I come from a family that's really open and talk, cry, whatever, do whatever, but I think our culture as a whole is competitive and is really, put on your good face to the whole world. When you close the doors, you can do whatever you need to do, but put on your good face so everyone else sees you as this successful human being. And a lot of other places in the world aren't like that. I mean, you walk out the door and you are who you are 100% of the time, because they allow that. It's just the normal culture. I mean, people I worked with, the personalities didn't change throughout the day. They just were who they were 24/7. And I think that's really uncommon in our culture. You see 5 different personalities in one person. I mean, I'm I definitely am that person, you know. I'll give you 5 different personalities in an hour, you know, depending on who I'm with, depending on the kind of person I need to be.
So those pick up some of the key points. The more competitive the atmosphere, and the more individualistic the atmosphere, and the less the society relies on a traditional network, support network, social network. So most people or a lot of people in our society, I think probably that's true of me, is in a way, I'm more married to my retirement account than my extended family. You know, when I am facing old age and you know, I have to make sure that support services and medical services are in place, you know, can I count on my extended family to be there? Of course, most people want to be able to count on immediate family, but sometimes not even able to count on immediate family, right? Or am I going to make sure that I have long-term care insurance? This is a very new thing, right? In most traditional societies, it's not material and financial resources that are the cushion. It's the local community that's the cushion. It's people that's the cushion. So in the case that there's not as much personal connection and there's more competitive, that's why I say Manhattan. In the corporate atmosphere, you have no idea. You be friendly to your coworkers, but they might be the ones who want to take your job. And it's not anybody's fault. Not anybody's fault. It's the structure of our society or certain environments within our society that make it difficult to make mutual human support more important than the competitive aspect. But we live in a more individualistic society where the individual has to rely on what resources I can immediately gather more than, you know, my local village. We're a very mobile population. Oftentimes we're going to end up spending much of our lives, including the end of our lives, in areas where we're not with people that we can trust in matters of life and death. To develop that level of trust, it requires having gone through great difficulty together. I have, you know, friends that I enjoy socializing with, but one can argue that the deepest bonds are created with people that you have gone through difficult experiences with, and you're there for them and they're there for you. But if you're a highly mobile society, it's very difficult to develop those kind of relationships.
And you know, I can really relate to you know what she said and what you said, and also what she said. And this is and what happened was the fact that I went back and you know, home for the holidays. But now I'm struggling with my self-identity in a way because I grew up in a country that religion is very important, Catholic, Christian. And my family is very, very, very Catholic. But I found myself lost in a way that I used to call myself religious, spiritual. But now I don't know what because I differ from what they believe now. It's hard to me to understand because I'm like in the middle of both, two different things. Like I don't know if I used to connect with people in a very deep level, but in this society, that deep level is not comfortable for a lot of people neither because it's uncomfortable to talk about, you know, different things at different levels.
Right.
And now I'm trying to help my family in a way, but they're very spiritual and I'm not, like very religious. So I'm kind of struggling with that. I'm like lost finding my spirituality because you know, in a way I used to be, but now the more I know, the more the more I educate myself, the more lost I get.
Right, absolutely.
So, and I think that's one of the things that I'm struggling right now. I don't know where my spirituality is, and my family is very important. So to me, it's important to understand how can I help them in that level.
Right.
And I think Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. So let me make a few comments and see if it strikes a chord with you. So what you meant by spiritual, religious, where you came from, of course, you may have gone to church, you may have participated in rituals, but it was much more than that. It was the life as a whole. It was just a shared rhythm of living, how deeply you were connected with your family, with friends, with local community, and how deeply you were connected even with the land, with the earth. and just the rhythm of the seasons. Now you've come here, you're studying in a different environment. It's much more intellectual. It's much more oriented towards what will your professional achievements and goals become. And that's very valuable in a certain sense. You have opportunity that you might not have had you remained where you came from. But at the same time, it's a world that your family or your extended family, they can't understand. They want to learn about it, but it's a different world of experience. And so now you're caught in between. You want to enjoy and to contribute in terms of the fruits of your labor here. You want to share that with them, but at the same time, you're a different person. You're still part of that world, you still feel that, but you can't completely return to who you were. And so it's an enormous struggle. But let me say something about that, because I've experienced something along those lines, having lived in Japan for 14 years and the rest of my life in this country, but never having lived in any place for more than about 3 or 4 years at a time, until I came to Eugene 11 years ago. So people say, where are you from? And I don't really have an answer. There isn't one place I'm from. But we live in an age of globalization where no local culture is untouched by the forces of globalization, the global economy, the environment, the way the environment is affected by economic, technological forces. And in that sense, and maybe there was never a time when a person said, I'm from X village, or I'm from X township, or I'm from X place, and it was truly safe from the force of globalization. It really stretches you to be caught in between different geographical, cultural, religious locations around the globe. But that dislocation, it brings up very deep questioning. But that questioning might be coming from a deep place in the sense of being very profound, very meaningful, because I might have to then pursue the question, where is my true home? Not X village, X town, X country, but what is my home in terms of the big picture of the universe? And when we get into the spiritual or religious dimension of life, that's part of what's involved in the journey of asking the question, who am I really? I could say, I'm from this village, I'm a professor at the University of Oregon. But when I'm faced with great suffering, loss of relationship, illness, death of a family member, the answer to the question, who am I really? And the answer Eugene, or the answer Bolivia, or the answer farmer, might not be enough to meet that question. But if through life circumstances, life presents me with the question, you might not find your true home, your true identity in any finite location on the face of the earth. You might have to plumb to the depths of the universe to find that answer. Then it's challenging, but maybe exciting.
She did ask a question about Drop the Story. Last night, because we keep talking about last night. Last Monday, we have, when we were sharing, we were talking about how people have a preconceived mindset of judging someone based on the religion, cultural background, the race, and so forth. And you went on by explaining how you can get to a place where you don't see those people based on your own preconceived mindset, but you see them beyond that. But when you were explaining here, I see like you have multiple components or explanation of that word than how I think. Am I confused for what you said, or is it the same thing you said about Drop the Story word?
Okay, I'm not sure I fully understand, but I think I'm trying to make the same kind of point. Yes, drop the story. So our exercise about experience the silence, and this bleeds over into Buddhism, which I need to get to, which is perfect, is oftentimes our knowledge comes not, our book knowledge tends to come point A to point B to point C. But deeper knowledge often comes in the form of simultaneously recognizing our limitations and a larger truth beyond any small story we tell. And that's because my ignorance is often inseparable from the insight that illuminates that ignorance. Okay. So, perfect segue into Buddhism. Okay, I'm not going to be able to touch on the Chinese religions, but that's okay. So there are some things here. These key basic concepts are not so important. There are many forms of Buddhism. How many people have heard of Zen Buddhism? How many people have not heard of Zen Buddhism? Not heard of Zen Buddhism. Okay, a couple people. Okay, so in our culture, Zen Buddhism is widely known, but the form of Zen Buddhism that people have maybe heard just a little bit about is monks sitting on a meditation cushion and attaining enlightenment. In Asia, this is actually a very small percentage. Most people in Asia, like most people in America or in Europe, are lay people who don't have the time and the resources to spend years and years of deep meditation in a monastery. And much of Asian Buddhism is devotional in much the way that even though we have Catholic monasteries where there are monks and nuns, by and large, most Catholics are devotional. So the most widespread form of Buddhism in Asia, especially East Asia, is a form of Buddhism called Pure Land Buddhism. And the largest sect is called Shin Buddhism. So that's the article that I had you read. And for the basic background of what goes into that, I have explained that in that article. But I'm going to tell a story that helps to illustrate the point that I was trying to convey to you, Richard, as well as to explain a key point in Shin Buddhism. So there's just not time to go into all forms of Buddhism. This is the form of Buddhism that I'm most familiar with. And I want you to look at under key points in Shin Buddhism. 2 columns of concepts. The left side, they're primarily synonymous, mostly synonymous, as well as the right side. That column's mostly synonymous. And the key is that these 2 sides of these 2 columns go hand in hand. They're like 2 sides of the same coin. So blind passion, boundless compassion, foolish being, and Amida Buddha, awakening of infinite light, self-power, other power, defiled land, pure land, Namo Amida Butsu. So the key in this is the dynamic between blind passion and boundless compassion. In Buddhism, some people have a stereotype that desire is bad, and so you're supposed to get rid of desire to attain this peaceful state called nirvana. And while in some schools of Buddhism there's an emphasis on lessening desires, no school of Buddhism says you should get rid of desires. That's part of being alive. You get hungry, you should eat. A famous Zen master is a kind of a Buddhist master. Zen master was asked by his disciple, what is the essence of enlightenment? And the master replied, eat when you're hungry, sleep when you're sleepy. That's it. What does that mean? That's what we do. But is that really what we do? Do I just eat when I'm hungry? No, I eat and I'm watching TV, distracted, not fully appreciating and fully digesting each morsel. Or, as I conveyed I get confused in the stories in different classes, but I think I conveyed in the story last week, if I want ice cream, am I really eating that ice cream because I'm hungry? No, I have to have the whole pint, right? So, just to eat because I'm hungry and just to sleep when I'm sleeping, if I could truly be in tune with the natural rhythms and work and live within the bounds of nature, have we succeeded in living within the bounds of nature without violating it in such a way that's going to come back to bite us in the ass? No, it's biting us in the ass right now. Okay? So, in Shin Buddhism, we say passion is not bad, desire is not bad, but it becomes a problem when that passion or desire is blind. Suppose, when I was a young teenager or whatever, and, I saw someone attractive, and I started to strike up a conversation. It was very nice. She's attractive. She has a nice personality. we get along. And I said, well, would you like to go for coffee sometime? Would you like to go see a movie, whatever? Fine, you know. But then at some point, it's clear that no, she's not really interested in going in that direction. You know, it's the line that we guys have to live with so much. You're really nice, but I don't like you in that way. Okay. Well, there was no problem up this. I had desire, there's no problem, right? But it becomes a problem if suddenly I say, no, you don't understand what we have. Oh my God, suddenly I'm starting to stalk her. That's blind. That's blind passion, right? I'm not living within the natural boundaries of what that desire allows, but rather suddenly I become attached to my image of what this is supposed to become. It all gets blown out of proportion, and I start to cause problems. So in Buddhism, desire is not the problem. It's when it becomes blind that it starts to cause problems, suffering for other people, suffering for myself. But when that blind desire, blind passion is illuminated by the larger truth, which is the ever-changing landscape of reality to which I have to adapt and adjust to live within the rhythms of what the universe presents me, then I'm released from being obsessed about this thing, this person, and I experience that moment as a moment of release and liberation and compassion. Compassion etymologically means feeling with. I'm suddenly able to feel with the flow of reality, which is beyond my preconceptions. You know, there used to be a planet named Pluto, which was the farthest planet away from the sun. But several years ago, scientists decided, no, Pluto does not fit the definition of planet, and Pluto was demoted to status of mere planetary fragment. Do you think that Pluto cares? No. This is all just a small human mind, trillions and trillions of miles away. Has nothing to do with reality. Long before there were human beings, the universe unfolded without dividing itself up into stars and planets and galaxies. And long after the human species is gone, the universe will unfold as a field of energy without having labels on it. So the view of Buddhism is reality, true reality is perceived before we put our labels on it. And it's ultimately beyond words. And in terms of our language, maybe the closest thing we can say about it is just oneness. But it's very hard for us to become aware of that oneness because we get caught up in all the labels that we try to impose on things, by which we try to pigeonhole what we think reality is or should be, who I think I am or should be. So it's this dynamic of blind passion, boundless compassion that's at the heart of Shin Buddhism. So rather than explain this theoretically, I'm just going to share a story with you that helps to illustrate this. When I was in graduate school in the Bay Area and I was doing a PhD in Buddhist studies, I got an invitation from a Buddhist temple to make a presentation, lead a weekend-long seminar on Buddhism. So I was excited. It was my first opportunity to have an extended experience like this. But I was a poor graduate student. I had a used car. It was a light blue 1985 Ford Tempo that I paid $2,800 for in 4 years. I paid $3,300 in repairs and maintenance. It's a three and a half hour drive down to San Luis Obispo. We didn't even have air conditioning that worked. It just had the knob. We were all excited when we bought this used car in February because we said, look, I said to my wife, look, we have air conditioning. We didn't test it because it was in February. Come June, it doesn't work. I said, okay, we're going to rent a car. I don't want anything bad to happen. So we rented a car at San Jose Airport. I had an upgrade coupon. So I got me a nice new red Thunderbird with cruise control and a cassette deck. My wife was with me. My cousin Scott was with us. I'm driving down the freeway, I-5. We left in the early evening. Cars coming from the other direction. I noticed they don't have their headlights on. But it's getting dark, so I've already turned my headlights on. I think, what's wrong with those cars? I put on my thinking cap. Light goes on. You know, it's rush hour. These people's minds are preoccupied. What's on TV? What's for dinner? Are the kids all right? But me, my mind is clear. I am a scholar of Buddhism. I'm going to give a seminar on Buddhism. I have no attachments. My mind is clear. That's why my reaction time is much faster. I'm driving along. Another 15 minutes passes. I start to wonder, gee, they still don't have their headlights on. And just as I'm wondering, there's a tapping on my shoulder, and it's my cousin Scott. And he says to me, Mark, you can take off your sunglasses now.
Are you serious? Oh my god.
You see, I had all these fancy ideas. I'm in this PhD program. I'm a Buddhist scholar. I'm not blinded by my image of myself. I can't see the sunglasses right in front of my eyes. That's blind passion. That's blind passion. But I'm only able to recognize that because I'm being illuminated by the hand of compassion. The realization of my blindness is simultaneous with my realization of the liberating truth. Different forms of Buddhism have different practices. In Pure Land Buddhism, the main practice is chanting the name of the cosmic Buddha Amitabha, which comes from the Sanskrit Namo Amitabha Buddha. How many of you have heard the South Asian greeting, Namaste? Namaste, yes. Namaste literally means, te means you, namas means bow. It literally means I bow to you. That's what Namaste means. The Namo of Namo Amitabha Buddha is the same as the Namas of Namaste. It means I bow. Because I'm a foolish being, filled with blindness, I bow and I give myself up to the larger reality, which is Amitabha Buddha. That is to say, the dynamic awakening of infinite life. That is to say, it's the illumination of reality beyond my conceptions. It's the oneness that illuminates me, that touches me, that embraces me, that dissolves all my ego hesitation and allows me to flow freely and with fidelity the flow of reality and to see things as they truly are. So in Buddhism there's an expression, yata bhutam, things as they truly are. Okay? So one of the things that's important in Buddhism in this regard is that in this form of Buddhism, Shin Buddhism, which is part of a larger movement of Buddhism that began around the 1st century called Mahayana Buddhism, Buddhism of the Great Vehicle, all the Buddhism of East Asia, China, Japan, Korea, also Buddhism that came out of Tibet, Nepal, Mongolia, as well as Vietnam. This is all Mahayana Buddhism. And in this Mahayana Buddhism, they say the most important thing is to realize this oneness. But if one realizes that oneness is always this dynamic unfolding of reality that one wants to be in tune with, to conform with, then there are no set dogmas. There are no set ideas. There's no one school of Buddhism that has a monopoly on how one should do that. In fact, different people, different cultures, different levels of ability require different expressions. And now that Buddhists have become more aware of the diversity of human religious life, cultural life, some people have taken that a step further and say it's not just with regard to Buddhism that you can't be dogmatic. You can't be dogmatic about anything. So that in order to perceive reality, don't even be attached to Buddhism, but learn from all different philosophies, all different religions, all different forms of therapy and counseling to find what will help you break free of your own limitations and to see the wider vista of human experience, the wider vista of human reality, so that you can connect with other people, that you could be most helpful. Okay. Now, I would say there are some potential drawbacks to this. Some potential drawbacks. It could be a license to just make up whatever you want to do. So one of the things that I think may apply to Buddhism as well as other religious traditions is the tension between tradition and innovation. Tradition brings centuries of knowledge that have been refined over time. But it can be limiting if that tradition is not open to culture and human experience that's always changing. And that may be blind to its own biases. So most traditional religious worldviews, some people argue, tend to be biased in certain ways. Biased against women, biased against other religions. So innovation is necessary. But if innovation is disconnected from tradition too much, one is not able to benefit from the refinement, from the accumulated knowledge of tradition. So whether one's staying within one religion or going outside another religion, there's always that danger, and certainly there's that danger with Buddhism. Okay. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Comments or questions?
So is there any difference between that type of Buddhism that is practiced in Vietnam, and you mentioned another country, like several countries?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any different that you can?
Yes, too many differences to go into in this class. Too many differences, yeah. So I just want to give you just one taste so that you begin to see.
My question is in regards to thinking of Buddhism and providing a service. With the idea of blind passion and something like addiction, alcoholism, or drug addiction, what would be the Buddhist approach to that?
There have been Buddhist writings on this. There have been sort of Buddhist centers or clinics that have been built around it. They have different approaches. And I have worked, I teach a course called Dark Self, East and West that looks at how different religions and philosophies look at the dark side of existence, which includes addiction. And I have a former student from that class who's an older, non-traditional student, and now I have him come and lecture every year. And he's drawn on, he has experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, which has been influenced by Christianity, but also the psychology of the Swiss psychologist Jung. And he's been in AA, but he's also been influenced by Buddhism and Taoism. So I think there are some tendencies that are different. But one thing about Buddhism, especially the forms that I'm used to, is there's two keys in working with addicts. The hardest one is ultimately there's nothing you can do as the helper, because the addict, him or herself, must come to the recognition, oh, I have this problem and I can't continue this way. And I would say just my limited knowledge of the literature, it probably happens just as often, if not more often, that in the natural course of a person's life, they come to see this for themselves rather than a helper bringing them to that point. So, you know, you can want to help a person as much as you want. You can say things to them. These may have certain effects. You can even do an intervention and get them into rehab. But it's really hard to say that that all has any real effect that's greater than a person hitting a wall and realizing, oh my God, I just can't live this way. And Dan has a great deal of knowledge in this regard. So he'll have his own perspectives to share. I've worked with some people who've had substance abuse or addiction issues. But the key ultimately is you can confront a person, but people who are addicts, who do substance abuse, they are professional deceivers. And more than they deceive other people, they deceive themselves. They are so skilled in deceiving themselves. It is really hard. Until they hit some kind of wall, it's really hard to get around that bend. And yes?
The question I have is, what about if the person is waiting, what we're talking like the dark side, feel like he's bound, and doesn't faith help that person to be released from the darkness.
It can, but that faith has to connect with their own self-recognition that they have a problem. And, well, Dan has a lot more knowledge, so I'm going to not say too much. But from the Buddhist side, the most important thing, and this is going to segue into my conclusion, okay? The most important thing is to take that journey with them, to be there for them, knowing that there might not be anything I can do. If you try to fix their problem, you can easily fall into a relationship of codependence. And this is very common in relationships, very common. Men with women, but more often women with men. I really love this guy, and I know that if I love him enough, he's gonna get better. No. That is disaster. That is absolutely disaster waiting to happen. And this also goes with the helping professions, especially for people who are beginning in the helping professions. If I do enough for this person, they're going to come around. You're not going to be the one to fix that person. You might be the handmaiden of some helping venue, but you know, I don't know. There's too much to say here, but it's kind of avuncular. I find as a teacher, my best teaching comes when I'm not too interested in my students. If I start to get too interested personally in my students, I start to interfere. It's best the avuncular attitude, the attitude of a good uncle or aunt, is to be truly concerned, but not too interested. Very different from parents. Parents are necessarily very involved and interested. That's why sometimes a good aunt or an uncle can really be helpful to a young person who's struggling, because they're willing to listen without trying to make you do something, and that's what's needed the most. Okay, but I'm just going to conclude by reading you a poem. Because in one sense, what human services may be about, what religion or spirituality may be about in certain contexts, is to understand the challenge of being a human being. And no matter how great or small it may appear from the outside, each life, one could say, is an epic journey. From birth through all the enormous challenges that each person faces as they grow up, as they experience and taste success, as they confront things that they perceive to be failure, challenges. Wow. And you know, I think that one never reaches a point in life. Maybe some people feel that there is a point, but I don't feel that there's a point where you can say, hey, you know what? I've been around the block a few times. I know what's going on. I've reached the peak. Now I can just sit back and relax. My parents are elderly now, and they've accomplished so many things in their life, but they face new challenges at the stage of life they're in. It's just a manner of speaking, but you could say each decade of life has its own themes, its own joys, its own challenges. And what an enormous journey each human being makes. But how great is it? How great a comfort, how helpful is it if you feel there is someone there who walks this journey of life with me? So I conclude with this poem for you, which is entitled, I Walk With You. I walk with you. I walk with you on the sandy beaches of summer. I walk with you through the brilliant leaves of fall. I walk with you in the powdery snow. I walk with you as daffodils bloom. I walk with you. I walk with you in the spring of youth and hope. I walk with you in the summer of house and home. I walk with you in the autumn of reflection. And I walk with you in the winter of remembrance. I walk with you. I walk with you through the storms of anger and pain. I walk with you through the laughter light and quick. I walk with you through the valley of loss and sorrow. I walk with you with a smile as broad as the sky. I walk with you. I walk with you as the sun rises and sets. I walk with you in the lonely concrete city. I walk with you through apple orchards and fields of hay. I walk with you across stream beds and railroad tracks. Sun, moon, mountains, and rivers. You walk with me, and I bow to you. O inconceivable ocean of light, sea of boundless compassion, the deep oneness of reality. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with me and for walking this part of the course with me. Thank you very much.
Could you tell us who wrote that poem?
It came from life itself.
I'll take that.
We're going to do some small group conversation and we have questions that Mark gave us.
Take it away, Mark.
Yeah, so we want to give an opportunity for everyone to sort of just share thoughts that came out of these questions. And in some ways, the questions, the way that I formulate is important, but in another way, it's not, because I think that we can see that you all have now, a lot to think about, a lot to share. But also, I also sense a great deal of collective wisdom here. So I think that you should just feel free to sort of chime in and share any thoughts that you would like to share based on, what we've been talking about, what the question posed, but other things as well.
In our group, we appreciate that we have Ben, who is also part of the group, and some of his wisdom of the questions that we're asking is that when you are a human service worker, best, regardless of your religion, you have to know that the job you're doing to the client is the primary obligation that you need to do. Because I was asking you like the question of people who they are religious, and this question of dilemma that we asked, that the 14-year-old girl come to you that I don't want my mom to know, and then I want you to help me find the pills and I want to abort the baby. Asking that if one was to say, because I'm Catholic, I want to refer you to my colleague or someone else, and they say, someone will lose the job because
I said if you do it too often,
yeah,
you probably are ill-matched for that position.
For that position, because he said that things comes together like this, because the government provides funding which is non-discriminatory, whatever it is. Then when you do use your religion comes above what you should do to help your client, then that becomes a problem. So we were discussing that on here. Okay. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, basically that we tend to go for the polar opposites. The government is all purely rational and self-interested, and religion is purely selfish and irrational. And the reality is there are indications of that on both ends. But for the most part, we're dealing with complexities that are not extreme complexities, but they're subtle complexities. And those subtle complexities tend to get in the way if a person chooses to polarize an issue versus to seek common ground. And so the examples that constantly come up are parents that don't provide their children any medical attention because of religious purposes and the child dies. It's very extreme. Right. Every year maybe 10 times that happens. Whereas in reality we have several million situations where families are not treating their children well, and we in the Child Protection Agency are dealing with all kinds of familial, personal, cultural issues and trying to mesh that together. So that's what the whole purpose is to try to bring together these two elements in a way that doesn't serve to pull them apart, but to bring them together. That's kind of the way we were coming to in our conversation. Any other thoughts on that first question? What are some of the differences?
Well, I kind of think there's like a difference between, like, if you're with a client and and I'm like the professional, there has to be a difference between, you can't go to the client and say, well, then you should seek a God. You kind of have to wait to see like what they have to say, like the support system that they follow. So like we kind of talked about in my group that like as a professional, you can like redirect them and say, well, who's your support group? What do you belong to? Are you spiritual? Are you religious? And if they just don't want to go there, then you have to just not go there. But like you kind of have to wait for them to say like, yes, I believe in something, so this is how I live my life by. And then as a professional, you can kind of work towards helping them in that way. And there's a difference between being a professional and trying to push them towards believing in something, or just listening to see what they have to say and then helping them in that aspect.
Excellently said. Yeah. And it's that getting to know, being reflective in your interviewing, being sensitive, individualizing, versus imposing or making assumptions. Very good. Easier said than done.
Another set of differences, even within religious human organizations, I'm imagining, are that one approach might be to resort to God, or kind of what you were speaking to of, God is the final answer, or how can we find God in your life, taking that approach versus encouraging the qualities of God, which might be ones of compassion or love or understanding or patience. Less about talk about a particular God, but more the qualities of.
When we were putting this class together, I had the task of meeting with many of the religious leaders. And one of the leaders, that we made an assumption that he was a religiously oriented person because he worked for an organization that had the name of a Roman Catholic priest or saint or something. And so the first thing out of his mouth was, I have a very strong spiritual basis, and my agency does lots of human services, but I'm not churchy. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? He says, I never frame our issues in churchy language, because I use terms like compassion and giving and caring and so that's exactly what you just said. And so when I said that would be a really nice orientation for our students to hear, even though he works for a religious organization. And but he had chosen to not frame it that way, just because it could be offensive to some people. So, anything else on number 1?
I just, going off of that, just want to state that the benefit of that is immense. I mean, the amount of people who are then going to come to this organization or this particular man or whoever he's then training, that approach is going to reach 10 times more people than, and not to say the church way is wrong in any way, but it's going to reach a specific kind of person. And even a person who does have faith and is a strong believer in God, I could imagine would really relate to that approach as well. Whereas it's not the other way around. I couldn't walk into a church and be reached on that level. But that's the kind of man I look forward to help or to have some sort of helping conversation. Someone who uses those kind of terms. I understand God and what that is to me, but I don't like to say, find God. Because that's just going to make me curl up into a ball.
Thank you.
I agree with a lot of what was said. I think it's important not to maybe, from a human service perspective, push religion onto somebody, but on the other end, when someone does find that as a strong a comfort, a place of where they can find what they need. It'd be in some ways irresponsible for us as a human service worker to not honor that huge aspect of the human, and I think that's where this class is actually very could actually help us in a lot of different ways.
I think the key concept is honoring. Honoring both sides of that is back to what she was talking to. Being honoring is different than promoting or denying. And I like that term, honoring. That's an honorable statement.
Thank you. I think we learn a lot of different, ways of reaching people, and this has been in this class we're learning about this aspect, and I think that's what's really unique.
I have a question. So I just want to ask you guys, if you have a client who says, "What do you think I should do?" What is your belief in this situation? What's the value that you hold? What then is appropriate or inappropriate for the guidance that you are asked to give? What are people's thoughts around that?
I kind of think that the unique thing about religion and human services, and maybe it's not a difference, but a big similarity, is that both offer a strong set of structure and a strong set of values. And if a client were to come to me and ask me what I thought, I would probably just say, this is a really great opportunity for you to explore these different values. And maybe that's the difference between religion and spirituality, is that you get to take some values and you get to really choose which ones are going to work best for you, that are going to help you get to where you need to be. And if that's one specific institutionalized religion, then that's what you need. And if it's not, then that's great too. But as long as you can find values that are tailored to help you get to where you need to be, then that's what's gonna be crucial for you.
Your question is a good question. Like she mentioned the word compassion. If a client is struggling, you say, "Are you a man of faith, or can you pray with me?" Maybe she's lonely, she doesn't have anyone around with her kids, she's struggling. It's okay if you are a man of faith to integrate her in a community where she can see a sense of belonging and support, where people can support her with the struggles that she's going through. That's what I believe, that she has given you the right. The bad thing is trying to impose her or try to manipulate her or where to go. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm.
To answer Carrie's question, from the way I see as human services, it's very important to be as honest as you can as possible. I think that when you start being not honest with somebody, they can see right through it, and it becomes less sincere, and then they will lose that respect with you. And I think that you shouldn't. I think you should just say what, if they ask your honest opinion, you should give it to them. Myself, I would give them my honest opinion. I'm a man of faith, and I would tell them that. So I think that's where I would go.
And I mean, in regards to Aaron's comment, I would also say it's important to keep in mind, obviously the policies of your agency, because I don't know if every agency would recommend specifically sharing your personal feeling, but if that was okay at your agency, then perhaps that's the way to go.
My job is to help take care of the human who I'm working with, and that's where I feel it's most important. So from my perspective, I probably wouldn't work someplace where they didn't want me to be honest with my client. But you're right. If I'm at some place where they don't want me talking about it, that probably wouldn't be the best fit for me.
I might speak less about the what of my religion or my spiritual approach, but more what it gets me, and then trying to link it back to, and what are you seeking? Regardless of how I might answer that question, it's almost like there's a question underneath that, what's lacking for you, or regardless of the choices, how I make sense of the world or my faith, or how I understand struggle, what it gets. Yeah, it's less about, it would be for me less about giving a one-word answer, well, I'm a Christian, or I identify with this God, or I do this one certain thing. I would speak more to what it gets me. Having some sort of spiritual understanding about the world brings me a lot of peace. So that's enough reason for me to identify with some spirituality, because it brings me peace. And I might turn it back to the client. How do you seek peace? Because for me, that's a kind of a fundamental quality of life that people seek. and that's part of the underlying of that question. What do you believe in? It's like, how do I come to peace? How do you come to peace, you know? That makes sense.
I have nothing profound to say, except to say I have to go.
Okay.
Thank you all so much, but I do believe that I'm going to get to rejoin you at the end of this journey.
Yes.
I profoundly thank you, and I profoundly honor your sincere, deep engagement with the issues that this course presents. And thank you so much for listening to me and to sharing with me and one another.
Thank you. We look forward to your return.
Yes. And she has a question.
Yeah.
Just
And I'm going to get you too.
In response to Carrie's question, I think that would be a really great time to practice our motivational interviewing skills by reflecting on what they're listening. So for me, I might say, after, what do you think? I'd say, well, actually, I heard you, talk about this a lot, and I talk about, this a lot, or I've heard you talk about this, or say this, and reflecting to get myself to talk even more about the question they're asking me to hopefully get them to answer their own question. I think that's probably the best and safest thing to do when in doubt.
I think there's a really happy medium that incorporates what every person has said so far, that continues to build rapport with the person that you're with, and build that trust, because like what Erin said, I think that is so key. Picturing myself looking up to someone like a counselor or a social worker and asking them what they thought, I think that without an honest answer, or if I felt like I was being deferred, I think that would discourage me a little bit and I would shut down a little bit. So finding a happy medium to use the skills that we have and to reflect and be able to bring in a component that is very universal, as Jenny was talking about, I think is key, because you want to have that trust and you want to respect the policies, because that's so key. But no matter what, I think an honest answer is 100% okay. It's just all in how you do it. And so that's something that I think is really important, and why we're thinking about it ahead of time now, because we'll have a little something to base that off of when we do get asked those really tough questions, so we're not stuttering, so we're continuing to build a positive relationship with the client that we're working with.
Renee, did you want to?
Please. No, please. I was just
shut up.
I was just gonna say, I think it's important though to remain human too. Like I hear what you're saying, Alden, but at the same time, I think it's really important. And maybe coming back to what Erin is saying, I may not be able to work in a place where I can't share some things. Being able to share, at least in the human sense of, yeah, this is who I am. This is, this is where I'm at, but it's not really about me. You're here because this is about you, and I want to help you, and you have to be real with people. You're working in human services because you want to work with humans. Well, you're a human too. You have to be human together, and I think sometimes it gets really frustrating because we try to be so politically correct with what we're talking about, and these are really human issues, and we have to be vulnerable with each other as well. So. And maybe I just need to work in a place where I can be vulnerable and I can be human. So
I think it's important to be vulnerable no matter where we are. I 100% agree. I think it's human issues. That's a perfect way to put it. Being honest, being real, that's so key. It's just about continuing to make it client-based. Exactly.
Sure.
Going off of that comment about how it's about the client, I do think it is important to remember it is about you too. The only way you're able to even react and help people in human services, self-care is what we teach each other all the time. And so the only way to build a good relationship is to make sure you're taking care of your needs as well. So, I know I would never be able to give myself or be completely honest with a client 100% of the time if I wasn't always aware of how comfortable I was with how much honesty I was giving. Yeah. If a client were to ask me those questions, about religion or whatever, I might feel comfortable divulging some of it, but maybe not all of it. It's kind of like in the classroom. There's a time and a place to share a certain amount. And so, yeah, I just think that's a good reminder is to be completely the best human services provider you can be. You need to make sure you're taking care of your own needs, too. Personal
We've got Monet, and then there, and then there.
I was just going to say that I love what you guys are all saying. I think a lot of what it comes down to is being able to read your client, though. I think what we're constantly taught every single day is that not one method works for client A, B, C, and D. And yes, and I love your honesty. I love that. If that's the person I am, I need to read that. And I think, I completely agree with you that people see right through you when you're not being honest. And that, especially on a one-on-one kind of client basis, is really going to hurt your ability to help them. However, it's really important. This is what we're doing. We're professionals in training. We're learning about people, and we need to be really careful about how much we give to someone, depending on their own vulnerability, their own level of impressionism, or how quickly they are influenced. And I just see that there's kind of a danger line. It's not always, nothing's black and white, and we all know this, but a lot of it is taking a couple sessions or, hours or days or months or years, getting to know that client first and seeing how far you can go with them. So, because it's all about keeping that client safe and really helping.
To kind of go back with, actually, Monet was perfect about what she was actually saying right there, to go with what I'm kind of, there isn't just one way. And to go back with Sam is, you have to know your population. To go back with Sam talking about like how much you give out. For those of us who are seniors in the FHS program, we had in Kathy Moxie's class, we had Diana Weiss come in and speak last term, and she talked about the tiers of vulnerability, or the tiers of not vulnerability. It's like the 3 tiers of self-disclosure. And the second tier is where you want to be, and when you're working with families who are living in poverty or in transition or whatever term we're using at that for that population, and just knowing your population I think is a big portion. So from my perspective, that's the population I love to work with. So going to that second tier of self-disclosure would make sense for me, where Shelby, if maybe she's working in a different population, or if she's working at some place where it's just that may not be the right time for her to get to that level of self-disclosure. So, or Monet, that other level. So
yeah, for me, I know that it's very critical and important that we come across when we're dealing with people original and natural. Mm-hmm. So if we become more mechanical and professional, and the person you helping will read you. For example, when I'm dealing with someone who want to help me buy a house, a realtor, loan broker, if I always read, are these people for real? It's all business. The way they talk, and maybe they talk the same thing that sound like very compassion. Maybe they did that to someone else and to someone else, and the client wanna see you come original, even when you speak about caring and so forth. So coming back to faith, my wife, who graduated this last summer in marriage and family therapy at the UFO, she was in a class where they have groups with a colleague from the class, and she's a Christian, but she was so afraid to come out and express herself, because she said, this is the UFO, it's all education, and maybe if I come across, they will look down on me. But she was surprised that 9 of her colleagues, her program is very small, there are only 25 students in marriage and family therapy program. They came discussing, they were talking about spirituality, and they said, we are Christians, and they were free and themselves. And she said, I felt like, why was I not coming also just in this group and be myself? So I say that it's always critical when you go, for example, me with the people I'm dealing with in the human services, I don't talk about my faith. I act my faith of compassion and live it. And I've seen even people come, are you a man of faith? I say, oh, really? Yes. How did you know? So by your act. So I have this more where I don't have to speak about being a Christian, whatever. I want to live it by serving people and loving and caring for them.
That is beautiful.
It's a good way. You know, it's having been in a secular university for 33 years. You know, I would say maybe I can count on one hand how many times people have asked me about my faith. You know, whereas they ask me what I think about FHS program thousands of times. You know, so the key is that we're talking about, and I think Mark was alluding to it last time, that we artificially create language for purposes of communication. And if we communicate a spirit of caring, a spirit of understanding and sensitivity, those are always good. Those are always good. If the spirit is one of, you know, imposition or disapproval or any of these, they can't be good. And so I think as human service professionals, by knowing yourself and knowing your client, you don't make many mistakes. You don't get into situations that are going to cause you to want to backtrack or take something back. I'm really interested in what you guys are thinking about the Buddhism angle to what we've been talking about, both in our reading and what Mark talked about today. What about Buddhism has resonated with you? Different way of thinking about relationships. What did you hear?
You want to go, Aaron?
No, I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I was
so
hoping somebody else would
like,
raise their hand. But
Well, don't worry, I'm keeping track.
Ration our portions. I'll be quick then. Something I see in Buddhism is, or my sense is that it's underscored or an underlying intention is acceptance, having an air of acceptance and accepting people, whereas my sense of some other religions has been more about the categories of sin or not sin, good or bad, and I don't have that sense in Buddhism that it's kind of all one, it's all acceptable, and I'd be curious to know how that influences clients differently.
Aaron.
Well, it's kind of a different way to look at it, I guess, but when I was reading the article and thinking about Buddhism, what immediately came to my mind was like harm reduction. And
Harm
like
reduction is the
client
same
where they're
concept
at.
I got. First, do no harm.
Yeah, well, and like what Jenny was saying with not a lot of religion, but some religions, it's like there's good, there's bad, there's what you do, there's what you don't do. But the feeling I got from it was it's not that simple. It's meeting a client where they're at and helping them figure out what works best for them, as opposed to what is good and what's bad and what they should do.
Yeah, he used the term understanding the challenge of being a human being. We all have these challenges, these difficulties, and what the Buddhist way appears to be to try to minimize those obstacles, you know, to help them maneuver around those obstacles. I mean, that's why his poem, I Walk With You, you know, not I guide you and direct you, or you know, it seems like it's a parallel path versus a more interventionist path. Anybody over here have any thoughts about the Buddhist way of thinking about therapy?
What I love is that I like the fact that it was like you're always facing new challenges, and that's just part of life. And so like the Buddhist way is that it's okay if you face a hard challenge, and it's okay if you mess up, but you learn from those mistakes and then you just go on, you know, and that's okay if you keep messing up because you're going to learn from that. And I think that's important when you're doing the like the therapist approach, is that it's okay, it's okay if you mess up, and that's okay, that's part of learning. So I kind of really like that idea between thinking the Buddhism and then therapy, and kind of mixing that together. It's okay, and you always face new challenges. And I kind of can connect that with FHS. It's it's okay, you make mistakes, but you keep going forward and you learn from those. So I really love that idea.
I just like the concept of being self-check, checking yourself when you are faced with blind passion, and I really like that when you see that you are in this blind passion state, that when you come out of it, that you're enlightened. I just really liked that. I thought that was really cool. It kind of makes you feel accomplished.
I kind of like it too.
Yeah.
Anybody else? It's interesting that he chose to frame Buddhism with psychotherapy, and especially in terms of the required reading, because it really did open my eyes to some interesting ways of thinking about the helping relationship that I think could be helpful to all of us. To be with people and to support people, and but not be so interventionistic, not so this is the right way to do it.
Yeah, it's like we're almost our own institutionalized religion, that may or may not be coming in and saying, here's the right path, and we want to help you get there. And we have the best intentions, but it's about how we're going about doing it. The twofold truth is something that I probably want to post up on my wall. I think it's very interesting, that self-check idea of taking the conventional truth and then moving that into the highest truth, and words and what's beyond words. Acting our helping, and acting our service, acting our compassion, not necessarily preaching it or saying it or trying to describe it, but just doing it. I love that blind passion and the foolish being able to identify when you are in that state, or maybe when an organization even is caught up in that state, and learning how to shed that ego and move into a place of oneness, or move into a place that is more holistic and comprehensive, and has and just exhibits the intention that I know we all truly have.
Is that Monet next?
Sure.
Sam?
What was I going to say? Oh, so Jenny said something that was really reached me for so many reasons. As soon as you label something a problem, it's a problem. And I think this is really big in our culture, that people come to us and we say, well, yes, you need help, and the only way you're going to heal is with my help. In Buddhism, I think that they're more, I've done my own some research, but I don't understand it that much, but Buddhism is really accepting, and it really allows you to just kind of work through your own problems. It empowers you, it gives you the tools to figure out how to heal on your own. And as when a client walks in, it's similar to the way I kind of saw it. It's similar to how we diagnose people with mental health. As soon as I say that you are schizophrenic, you're going to really feed into that. And it's really harming. And it doesn't, everyone here knows this, I'm sure, and the country knows this, what we do, the harm that happens with the diagnosis and the low level of medication that happens. And that to me is similar when a client walks in and we say, yeah, you have a problem. It's encouraging that problem. It's feeding that really negative, to just say, this is where you are right now. And then I'll be with you in this space. And we can just kind of work through it. We can go back, we can go forth, we can go whatever direction you want to be. Maybe we can just sit, and just be here. But let's just be where you need to be and not label it a problem, because then it's gonna be all of a sudden my issue. It's the idea of oneness. It's my. If we're not one, then if the idea of oneness is that that if you can help me, then I can help myself, because none of us are separate. And if someone understands that, or rather someone doesn't understand that and sees the differentiation of two people, and I look at my counselor, I immediately say, you have to help me, and you're the only way I'm going to heal. So
I think it's appropriate to acknowledge that we are looking through a real limited scope of how Buddhism and psychotherapy is related. And although it's good that we're learning and we're going there. I would encourage us to refrain from this is the Buddhist way, because we really do have just barely introductory level understanding. I think it's neat to hear everybody's interpretation of it and to continue to study it if it interests you. We hadn't acknowledged that yet, so I thought it would be important.
Sam, and then
just something that stuck out to me that I think is kind of touches on question 3 as well, kind of relates to not just Buddhism but really any other religion working with human services, is the tension he talks about between the deeper significance and the immediate practical need. And that concept just really stuck out to me personally and just professionally. And then the story that he talks about with Kisagotami, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but how Buddha helps her both meet that practical need, but then also reach that deeper significance at the same time. And I think it's a really good example for us as human service workers that we can't just meet the practical need of the moment. We need to, but we also have to help that person discover that deeper significance as well at the same time, which is very difficult.
And I'm going to talk a bit about that next week, about the role of what helping does. I mean, is it really that we're helping other people, or are we really helping ourselves? I mean, I want to go on that teeter-totter a little bit and see how we can reconcile that, because in theory, by helping other people, we're really helping ourselves. And so and if you just are helping people because you think they need it, it's a little shaky.
Help probably isn't so good.
Well, it gets a little shaky. Was that Tara that gets the last word? Wow, you started us off today. You started us off and you finish us.
I just wanted to comment on what Carrie said.
Okay, good.
It's not that great though. I just wanted to say I'm really happy you brought that up, because that's like what I've been thinking for the last 20 minutes, but I felt way too uncomfortable to say it. Because I think that it's important to recognize that a lot of the religions we're going to get into more, we're just getting into the basic part of them. And so I think it's easy to relate them to Christianity, since that's the one most people know the most about. And so then it's easy to condemn Christianity because you know the most things about it. And so if you only know just a little bit about other religions, you can say, hey, this sounds great. And I don't know, so I just think it's important for people to remember that, especially since most religions stem from that one and different aspects of it, and a lot of them are very relatable. And so I just think that was a really good reminder for you to give the group, is that we should all do a lot more research too into these ones.
And Buddhism is, I think it's one of the oldest. So it's been around a long time. And so pretty interesting. So next week I'm going to be talking about the role of service and spirituality, and presenting it from a variety of traditions. We're calling it topic pluralism. And then we're also going to talk about Hinduism. So consistent with what Carrie just said, we're just scratching the surface of these different traditions, with the idea that those of the religions that you're interested, you're going to study more. You know, you're going to open yourself up to more ideas about them, but that each of the traditions that we're going to present you is going to be a thumbnail sketch. Hopefully more than you knew when you came in, but not so much that you think you're an expert and that you become dangerous. And we're saying that for all of ourselves. So thank you for being here, and we'll be giving you feedback on your papers.
Yeah.
And good to see you all. So look forward to next week.